My question for you is, do you think UCL should employ affirmative action in its admissions processes?
I think they should definitely consider affirmative action, but they shouldn't consider like one thing in isolation. So I know they look like race and ethnicity and then like socioeconomic background and income, but rather than looking at race and ethnicity, because obviously like we're different races but we've had the same upbringing in terms of income, so I don't think it's a matter of race and ethnicity. I think it's more whether the race and ethnicity has had an impact on socioeconomic upbringing. So yeah. I suppose definitely looking at income and whether you went to a state or a private school, yeah. And then only then looking at whether this was down to race.
It should. I think that it's really vital that during admissions candidates are viewed as individuals and not sort of assigned as part of a larger group. And I also think that merit should be the primary focus of UCL admissions, like 100%. But there are situations where, through no fault of their own, individuals or groups of people are underrepresented or have high barriers to entry and therefore find it harder to compete with other candidates. And I think in those situations, individual actors like UCL have a moral duty to try to address those imbalances and eliminate those barriers to entry. I mean, they already do it with disabilities and stuff like that. So I don't see what the difference would be with economic disadvantages. I think it's also extremely important as an educational institution that UCL does this because of the pivotal role that education has in someone's life. But I guess the sort of crux of the issue would be riding the line between positive action, which is inherently a good thing, and positive discrimination, which is obviously bad and I think unlawful. How they would do it, I'm less sure about. I think that it should definitely be an economic thing rather than looking at superficial characteristics like race, gender, religion, although those are good indicators for underrepresentation. So that's what I think.
So I think it is important to pay attention to inclusivity during the application process at university. However, I think that this should not be done by reserving places for students coming from minorities, as this would only underline the fact that they are at a disadvantage, which might not always be the case. Rather, I think universities should gain a deeper understanding of the socioeconomic backgrounds of students by asking them more questions during the application process in order to understand whether they need any kind of assistance and to establish fair access to university for everybody.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
So yeah, on the why, the UK has a deep-seated history of racism, and what stems from that are issues of inequality on the basis of just identity and social inequalities, also economic inequality. And this is an important intersectional issue because the lack of economic inequality that does also fall along racial lines typically results in the fact that people who come from minority backgrounds are less advantaged. And ultimately, as we've seen, is that your economic situation plays a large factor in how much you have access to different educational resources, and ultimately what kind of socioeconomic status you will hold in society later on. So just preparing for university, and given how competitive the admissions process is, it requires that you have access to those resources, which people from underprivileged backgrounds don't have. So affirmative action essentially tries to reverse this, which I think is important if we're going to be promoting this idea of equality of opportunity and meritocracy. You need to account for historical differences that still play out today.
Yeah, so UCL currently has an access scheme that can be activated to affirmative action, and it has 3 pillars of helping students from low economic backgrounds or more disadvantaged students to attend university. So if you're from an area with a low average income, if you're from an area that's got low university attendance, and also if you're from an area or if you're from a school that's got low average GCSE or A-level grades. And by being part of one of those groups, if you get an offer from UCL, you'll typically get a dual access offer, and that gives you the opportunity to write a small essay or something equivalent, and to be able to do that and then get a lower grade because to then get into the university. And I think this is really important because it helps students from these disadvantaged backgrounds be afforded a similar opportunity to students that can get into university without these natural disadvantages that they have from being where they're living. But speaking of like how to improve that, we think UCL should preemptively address students that are coming to university before they've really even thought about it. So when leaving year 11/entering sixth form, because a lot of students from these disadvantaged backgrounds may not even have the thought that they have the opportunity to go to university. So to have the understanding that access schemes like this are available for students right off the bat will then advantage the students to think more minded in the sense of going to university, and gives them an awareness of the opportunities that are available to them that the scheme and the access can provide.
Thank you.
Affirmative action is the rationale behind it. I think it's a very well-meaning policy. However, I don't really agree with the way it's being executed a lot of times. Especially when we consider universities, I think we need to consider that we're trying to get the best people. Like it should be all equal on the score. So if we're making it so-called easier for like people of like who are racial minorities, I feel like it's kind of like it's not really uplifting in a way, you know. It's like trying to say like they can't do it unless you make it easier for them to get in.
I see.
Yeah. So in my opinion, like other ways are better to try to encourage like more black people or Hispanic people or Asian people to enter universities. So for example, like I think at the pre-university level, like mentorship and coaching to try to help black people to find the necessary resources to enter university.
I believe that UCL should have some form of affirmative action for university applications, but on the short term. Indeed, minorities are faced with increasing challenges to get to university. It is harder for them to have access to crucial things such as social capital, an important network, and to get help for university applications, for example. However, this should only be a short-term solution. Indeed, on the long term, problems should be tackled much earlier in the education, especially at the primary school and then a high school level. So I believe it's necessary, but only on the short term.